Good night from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. According to a series of exit polls in the European Union countries, which have been voting in the European Union's parliamentary elections between Thursday and Sunday this past week, the turnout will be the highest one since 1999. But which parties or coalitions or movements it will benefit, that is still to be seen. In several EU countries where so far there are exit polls or unofficial results available, it seems that the right-wing national conservative, populist, far-right, Eurosceptic, anti-Islam and anti-immigrant parties are not scoring quite as huge victories as predicted. In at least one major EU country, Germany, the Greens have been the big winners or gainers rather. The Liberals were doing well in Ireland, Slovakia and Latvia at least. The Social Democrats surprisingly seem to have won the EU elections in the Netherlands this past Thursday. In Finland, the centre-right National Coalition Party seems to be winning the election with the Social Democrats, Greens, centrists, and the National Conservative True Finns virtually tied for the second place in terms of the number of seats. In France, as expected, the far-right national rally Rassemblement National seems to be winning the elections slightly ahead of the liberal La République en Marche, or the Republic on the March. Yeah, in Germany, the center-right Christian Democrats still will remain as the largest party in that country's delegation to the European Parliament. In Austria, the center-right People's Party seems to be winning the elections easily. Let's look at the results then somewhat more in detail, according to The Guardian. Yes, a projection for France 2 television based on exit polls. Le Rassemblement National would come first with 23.2%, ahead of President Emmanuel Macron's centrist and liberal La République en Marche with 21.9%. If confirmed, the result is symbolically damaging to President Macron because he put himself center stage of a bruising and personal election campaign, styling himself as a champion for Europe and defining the vote as an existential fight between pro-Europe progressives and Eurosceptic far-right nationalists. The vote was the first midterm test for Macron, who became the French president in May 2017 and whose term therefore will end in May 2022. It is not yet clear whether he plans to seek a second term. At least he has not yet publicly announced his decision on the matter. And his new centrist party, after 6 months of yellow vest anti-government protests, saw riots, death and injuries across France. However, in the recent weeks, the number of estimated protesters in those gilets jaunes or yellow vest marches has steadily declined. Le Pen had said repeatedly that if her party beat Macron, he should resign. It's easy for her to make such a claim from the opposition, of course. France had an unexpectedly high turnout, estimated to be over 50%, the highest in decades and higher than the last parliamentary elections in 2017. From noon on Sunday, as voters went to the polls, it was clear the turnout was high in areas with strong support for Le Pen, including in the Pas-de-Calais in the north and Picardy, as well as in rural areas where the yellow vest protests on roundabouts began last autumn. The French far-right election campaign, headed by a slick young candidate from the Paris banlieue or suburb Jordan Bardella, had steadily grown in support since January 2019. Bardella, 23, is now set to become one of the youngest ever members of the European Parliament. Le Pen, who took over the far-right party, which was for decades called Le Front National, the National Front, from her father Jean-Marie Le Pen in 2011 and recently changed its name, is experienced at shaping European election campaigns as a national protest vote against those in power. Her party also came first in the last European elections in 2014. Le Pen pitched this campaign as the ultimate protest vote. Her party's main message was "Stop Macron," styling it as a referendum against the centrist young leader whose popularity has slumped. Le Pen no longer wants France to leave the EU in a so-called Frexit, nor to leave the euro currency, which means that she knows how to flexibly and opportunistically change her positions, because if she was a consistent far-right national conservative, she would advocate France's exit from both the European Union and the Eurozone. Instead, along with other populist far-right and nationalist allies such as Italy's Matteo Salvini, she is seeking to unpick the bloc from the inside, promoting what she calls a union of national states. Steve Bannon, the former White House strategist for the Republican US President Donald Trump, who has described himself as an informal advisor to nationalist parties in Europe, arrived in France during the election campaign, saying, "Of all the elections happening this weekend in Europe, those in France were by far the most important." He predicted an earthquake for Le Pen, saying Salvini, Le Pen, and the United Kingdom's Nigel Farage could head four of the biggest political parties present in the European Parliament. The irony, of course, is that Britain is set to leave the European Union at the end of October 2019, when then legally the 73 British members of the European Parliament will lose their seats. Macron had called the elections the most important since 1979, when he was just a little baby. He was born in, I think, December 1977, warning the EU was facing an existential risk from nationalists seeking to divide the bloc. Coming second does not in theory change Macron's ability to govern at home, where he still has a large parliamentary majority in the French parliament's lower house, l'Assemblée nationale, or the National Assembly. But having staked so much personally on the campaign, including appearing alone on election posters, the second place position is a symbolic setback for the delivery of his pro-business project to overhaul the welfare state at home, as well as his ability to influence the European debate. The Paris government is preparing several major political changes, namely unemployment benefits system and pensions, and yellow vest protests are continuing even if the numbers of protesters are down. Britain Elects has posted its poll of polls in a forecast of tonight's results. It makes for interesting reading, with the Labour and the Conservatives potentially doing slightly better than some have been saying. The Brexit Party, or United Kingdom Independence Party, would get 24 members of the European Parliament. Liberal Democrats would get 15, Labour would get 14, Conservatives would get 10, Greens would get 4, the Scottish National Party would get 2, and then PC would get 1. Let's see how it turns out. By tomorrow, we should know better.